Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Jock. Good morning, everyone. I have to turn the radio off prior to doing this, so I missed what you were sharing. But today, everyone, we're going to do a little bit different show. I know there's some new listeners, so if you'd like to get a feel for how this show is, I encourage you all to listen when I'm back in a couple of weeks after a little summer hiatus that I'm going to be taking. Today's show is different because Stan the coffee man is not in. George by the door, not here. There's no one in the upper classroom but me, standing among the empty desk and the couches where the classmates usually sit. People are listening to this either live stream on their radios or via Zoom. Why is it just me in the upper classroom? Because today is the 9-year anniversary that I lost my wife. Normally, when this show airs close to that date, I just do a mention. But because today is the actual day, the 20th of June, and Jock always encourages me that this is your show, T-Boz, broadcast what you want, I'm going to do a tribute to her today. So the lights are not on in the upper classroom. It's just the daylight that's coming in, the big windows there that face Water Street. Like I said, I'm standing amongst the desks. I'm not up on the stage like I normally am. And so I'm going to tell some stories today about Lori. I'm going to tie in some meaning to those stories into my life and hopefully your life. And then we have a beautiful song at the end that I'd like all of you to stay tuned and listen to. My wife was not rich. She was not college educated. She didn't have a lot of things. But there are very few women in this world that could match her. Her force, her energy, just her presence. She was such a force at the company of Benchmark, where she worked for 11 years, that the company had me for 2 years speak to all levels of the company, from Rhode Island to Massachusetts to Connecticut, about her and how she cared for the elderly. She was in the wait staff. She was not a nurse. And the head of the education department called me 9 years ago and she said, Tommy, Benchmark has 6,000 employees. And our goal through your talks to have 6,000 Lori Ann Bozzies at Benchmark. Boom. And so the company had me go from every level, from the dining room staff all the way up to the brass and the owner of the company, speaking about how she cared for those people. They loved her so much, they paid for her funeral, they paid for our home expenses, they paid medical expenses. They did so much, even going as far as naming the dining room out there at River Ridge after her. You know, my friends, we talked a couple of weeks ago about God has a plan for you. And my wife realized her plan that God had for her at 46 years old when we moved up here to Torrington. But like I said, she was a force. She was a mother. She was tough. She was a rebel. She understood me. She never wavered. She was generous. She was a great listener. She could repeat everything back to you that you said to her. She was faithful, not religious. And she was an awesome mother. We start with Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, and it says, and a man shall cling to his wife. And I clung to her for 31 years of our marriage. Isn't that an interesting word? I've said this before, cling. Men are supposed to be the stronger of the sex, but Scripture tells us that a man shall cling to his wife. It doesn't say he's going to hold her hand, go for walks, sit on her lap. It says cling to her. Isn't that amazing? And I clung to her. And there's going to be stories that you're going to hear today that are going to illustrate that. I met my wife when I was in a band called the Bozzi Brothers. It was myself, my brother, my twin brother, the drummer, and my younger brother was the lead singer, at a place called the Hi Ho. Now, my wife was born on March the 16th, which is 316. Yes, probably the most famous scripture quote in the Bible, for God so loved the world. And John, who wrote 3:16, put in there when Jesus was crucified that Jesus had a criminal on his left, a criminal on his right, and Jesus in the middle. So why does John tell us that Jesus was in the middle when he goes ahead and says there was one on his left and one on his right? He does that because he wants to draw our attention to Jesus. And what's ironic, because my wife was born on 3/16, when I met her at the Hi-Ho, the band that was a restaurant we were playing in, her sister Gail was on the right. Her sister Pamela was on the left. And Lori was right in the middle. She had beautiful blue eyes. She had a perfect nose, a beautiful smile, brown hair. She captivated me. And after sitting and talking with her a few weeks at the gig, as they called it, I said to my mother, I'm going to ask Lori Rogers out on a date. And then we never looked back. Story number 2, the radishes and the church talk. What does that mean? When we were first married, I had a garden and I grew radishes. And so one morning I got up early, I went out there and I pulled all these radishes and they were huge, right? And they had dirt on them. So I bring them upstairs to her. And, you know, you're young, you're only 25 years old. So I wake her up and she's putting herself back in the nightgown. And the dirt is falling on the bed. I said, Hon, look at these radishes. Look at these radishes. She's like, wow, they're huge. I'm going to put them in a salad. She wasn't complaining about the dirt that was falling on the floor. We had a very neat house. Many years later, I was doing a talk for the rededication of a church, St. Patrick's in Bridgeport. And it was the biggest fundraiser we ever had, the most successful fundraiser we ever had. And I had to do a series of 4 talks to help motivate the fundraising. But at the end, we were having a huge mass, and we were expecting over 2,500 people to come to this mass. It was on September the 13th, ironically. And so the night before that mass, and I'm going to tie the radishes into this in a minute. The night before that mass, we got into bed, and I said to her, honey, can I share with you what I'm going to speak about at the big mass tomorrow? She said, yeah, go ahead. So I told her everything that I was going to say. And she said to me, it's perfect. Leave it alone. Don't change anything. When I got up there on the 13th of September, those more than 2,500 people, every single word that they heard was exactly what I whispered in her ear the night before. What's the purpose of the 2 stories? I brought everything to her. There was nothing that was insignificant and nothing that was over-significant. It didn't matter if it was a handful of radishes or a major talk at the end of a fundraiser at a mass. I clung to her. That's what it means by cling. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that you trust that person so much and love that person so much that you bring everything. And those of you who are married, I hope and I pray that everything, whether it's radishes, metaphorically speaking, in your world, or a talk, metaphorically speaking, you bring that to the person that you love. Woody Harrelson says, you know you're in love when you go grocery shopping together. And I did. I used to go with her, and Joey said, I hate when you come with me because we spend more money. Of course, there were more cookies and things like that. My wife loved me, truly loved me, and married me because she loved me. There was a person I knew back, I'll say a few months ago, and the person said that my wife was consumed by me, and that a person with me, that their life is consumed and overwhelmed by my disability. I disagreed. I said, my wife married me because she loved me. I was disabled, but not as visually impaired as I am now, but visually impaired. And the person argued with me and said, no, it's not love, it's consuming. People who say those things are dangerously stupid. And what they're consumed with is their own greed, their own malice, and their own selfishness. They don't know what love looks like. They're incapable of love. What my wife showed me is that in spite of my disability, she saw the real Tommy. Like I said, she understood me. And so she married me out of love, not because she was consumed by me. Story number 4. And this is a great... Oh, no, I'm going to go to story number 3. Sorry. It's live radio. We do make mistakes now and then. Story number 3. You got everything. Years ago, I was in the home remodeling business, and my brother and I did painting and home remodeling and all of that. He still has the business today, and he does quite well with it. And in those days, we had a metal box, and in the metal box was estimate sheets and pencils and pens and a little computer. This is before you had smartphones. And maybe some color charts that we would show a person who was going to have their house painted and all of that. And before we left, because she always drove me on these estimates, I wasn't able to drive, obviously. And so before we left, she would always say to me, "You got everything?" I go, "Yeah, I got everything." So we go on this one estimate. I go in, I talk to the people, and I come back to the car to write up the estimate. I open up my metal box where the estimate sheets were, and I don't have a pen. And I looked at her in the car. I said, "You got a pen?" She said, "Yeah, I have a pen. It's in my pocketbook." I said, "Can I have it?" She said, "Nope." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I asked you when we leave the house, you got everything. You're a businessman." She said, "What are you going to do someday when I'm not around?" She said, "You're going to have to go back up to that house and knock on the door and ask those people for a pen." And I did. Remember, I told her she was tough. I wrote out the estimate. I think we got the job. But years later, after she passed away, and as I began to get very interested in the life of dance, as a lot of you know, swing dancing and contra dancing, square dancing, all of that, I was here by myself. When I went out at night, I had to make sure I had my money, my wallet, my ID, whatever I needed, tickets for wherever I was going. Everything had to be on me. And a woman said to me once, "Lori did a good job with you, because in your new life, you can be independent and very responsible because your wife didn't coddle you. She was not consumed by me." And even today now, that phrase, "you got everything," every time I leave the house, I make sure the doors, the windows, whatever needs to be done, because she said to me, "You're not going to get this pen. You're going to have to go back up to the house and ask those people." Jock, I have another beautiful story coming up. It's 11:29. Could we do the sponsors now so that I can keep rolling along?
Sure, no problem. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors for supporting your local community radio station and allowing us to bring you the fine quality community programming that you're witnessing at this particular time. We'd also like to invite you, each and every one of you, to participate in your community through your local community radio station. If you're a business, artist, venue, or person of interest and you want to blast off to let the community know what you're doing, what you're up to, and what you're all about, then indeed, Thursdays is one way, and it can be your day. And you can let your fingers do the walking so we can do the talking, or you can make the magic happen right here in the WAPJ studios. Whatever suits your fancy, because we aim to please, okay? And with that being said, we'll take this opportunity to turn the floor back over to T-Boz for more words of wisdom and moments of meditation.
Thank you, Jock. Story number 4. My wife was Swedish descent and English descent, and so she was not one to write a lot in cards. It would mainly just say, "Love, Lori," or "Always Lori," that kind of thing. Her mother just used to write, "Love, Mom." And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm Italian. I just used to get a blank card and I'd fill it, and I'd probably end up writing on the tablecloth as well. But my wife can say in 5 words what would take me an hour to say. But when Emily was a year old, she wrote a very long thing in her card, her year-old birthday card. Not that Emily could read it. Emily has that card today. She's our oldest daughter. And what she wrote started with this. It says, "The words I love you don't even begin to explain the way I feel about you." And when I found that card, I said, I was at work in those days. She must have looked in that crib in awe of the child that God has brought to us. The words I love you don't even begin. She didn't say the words I love you encapsulated. The words I love you are a start. The words that we use, the words that Jesus used, loved one another as I have loved you. For Lori didn't even begin to explain the depth of feeling that she had for Emily as she laid in that crib as an infant. That's motherhood. I'm all for women getting paid as much and being treated equal. But some of you may not like this, but I think that we devalued motherhood. And what gets me upset is when I hear a young gal say, oh, I'm just a stay-home mom. Let me tell you something, boys and girls. Being a stay-home mom and being a corporate vice president is the same levels of responsibility. The pay is a little different. The pay is more for the mother. My two girls are where they are because of her. It's nothing that I did. And so that love, that motherly love, those of you who are mothers out there, embrace that. You carry these children. They're part of you. And so whenever I think of that card, she was really opening up. That was, and then I'll read another card that went to my daughter, Rachel. There was more to that card. But the words I love you don't even begin. Don't even begin. The Da Vinci Code, story number 5. Back in 2003, there was a book that came out called The Da Vinci Code. Everyone was reading it. No one understood it. I bought it for her for Valentine's Day. I gave it to her. She read it in 3 days. She understood the whole book. My wife never graduated high school. She dropped out when she was a junior, and she went to work, believe it or not, in elder care down at a place called 3030 Park in Fairfield. Ironically, the company Benchmark that she ended up working for at 46 was founded by a guy who used 3030 Park as his model for the company that he was going to one day name Benchmark. Kind of ironic there. But anyway, getting back to the story. So my wife didn't graduate high school. And at that point of her life in 2003, we had books everywhere on the kitchen table, in the bathroom, in the living room. I mean, there were books, 3, 4, 5 books on the back porch. There were books everywhere. And she was simultaneously reading all of these books. So one morning I come down, we're having coffee on a Saturday. She's sitting there reading a book. And I said to her, honey, I said, you read like crazy at this point in your life. I thought you didn't like school. She looked at me and she said, I didn't like school. I'm not stupid. Boom. She wasn't stupid. Of the 4 women that made an impact on my life, it was my wife, my mother, talk about strong, my Aunt Louise, who was so far ahead in women's rights well before Helen Reddy, and my Aunt Margie, who went to special school but had more wisdom than most college graduates. Those women have greatly impacted my life. But I have friends of mine that I met in bereavement, and some of them are listening today, and I gave them Lori's books. And I said to them, in the book I wrote, no matter what happens in life, remember, you're not stupid. And so that really straightened me out. I didn't like school. I'm not stupid. Sometimes we match intelligence with how many book reports someone does. But there are some people who are very bright and do not say very bright things. And a lot of you know people like that. Story number 6 talks about the coffee pot. My wife had a great sense of humor. So one morning I get done doing chores. I come into the kitchen. I lay down by the coffee pot. I even put ketchup on my mouth like I was bleeding, like I was dead. I was stretched out. And she comes shuffling into the kitchen. She looks down and she says, you're blocking the coffee pot. I opened my eyes. I said, but I'm dead. I did. She goes, I don't care. You're blocking the coffee pot. So she had that English dry sense of humor. And I appreciated that for years. Story number 7, the special award. At Benchmark, where she worked, once a year they give out a special award, and you get to go to this big tuxedo and gown event up in Massachusetts where they're headquartered. They give you a $500 check and a plaque and all of this stuff. So one year she was up for the special award. Came home from work, says, hon, I got good news. I said, what is it? She said, everyone's talking in the building that I'm one of the people that are up for the special award. I think I'm going to get it this year. I've been doing a lot of things right. And, I really feel that, I'm going to win it. Oh, great. I said, when do you find out? She said, we're going to find out tomorrow morning at the huddle. So, great. The huddle was at 11 o'clock. I said, you let me know. She was rubbing her hands together. Whenever she got excited, she'd rub her hands together, beautiful smile, her sparkling blue eyes. So at 11 o'clock the next day, I call her and I say, so tell me what happened. When are we going? Do I have to rent a tuxedo? She says, I'll tell you when I get home. The news isn't good. I said, uh-oh. So she comes home walking a lot slower into the house than she did going out that morning. Sat down with a cup of coffee that I made her, and she said, I didn't get the special award. I said, why not? He said, you said everyone said you were the front runner. That was the word in the building. She said, Tisha got it. I said, really, Tisha? And here's what she said. And here's the lesson for all of you. She said, she deserves it. I said, what? She said, she deserves it. She said, she does things just a little bit better than me, a little different. She said, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to work harder next year so that I can win the special award. She wasn't envious. Remember Susan talked last week about her father said, don't be envious. She wasn't envious. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't jealous. She wasn't looking for revenge, right? She wasn't looking to be avenged. What she saw was that the other girl was more qualified and she won and she wasn't bitter. And then look at the end after she never got a chance to win the special award because she passed. But though she didn't win the special award, look at all the accolades that she got. Because God will give us the goods. God will give us the crown greater than what we imagine. She has a dining room named after her. We had a lot of assistants from the company. They paid for the funeral, like I said. Okay? I did talks for 2 years after she died. 2 years at 3 New England states. So if sometimes you think you should have won and you didn't, don't worry about it. Wave the checkered flag like Lori did to the other person. That's being the bigger person. That's the special award, not the $500 and the plaque. Matthew tells us, be careful not to perform righteous deeds in order that people will see you and notice you. That leads me to story 8, the grilled cheese sandwich. She was in the dining staff, and one day she was bringing a grilled cheese out to a woman who was about 95 years old and had slight dementia, and this woman would not have known if she was getting a sandwich or a bowl of soup. But as Lori took the grilled cheese sandwich out, the pickle was kind of shashgad, as they say in Italian, a little mushad, look mashugana for those of you who speak Yiddish, and the sandwich was kind of sunken in, and the doily underneath it was kind of wrinkled. So she went back into the kitchen, redid the whole dish, fresh pickle, fixed the bread, put a nice doily, freshened it up, and she said to the chef, now this is a sandwich I'm proud to serve. And she went out and she put it in front of the woman, and the woman said, oh, Lori, I love grilled cheese, with a big smile on her face. What's the point of this story? In our lives, in our careers, in our jobs, what grilled cheese sandwich are we willing to just let go by in the case of mediocrity? Are we willing, like Lori did, to say, this isn't good enough? Whether it's a product or a service or our hearts in a relationship, this isn't good enough. We're going to go back into the kitchen, metaphorically speaking, and we're going to reboot that grilled cheese sandwich so that we can be proud and improve the life of another person. You see, my friends, Lori didn't build a wing on the Benchmark. She didn't build a facility out in Rhode Island somewhere. What she built was her reputation, one grilled cheese sandwich at a time. In life, it's the small little things that make the difference. Bing, bang, boom. Most of us are looking for the big fix. And it says right there in Matthew, don't do things that people are going to notice. The only person who noticed that grilled cheese sandwich was the little woman who got it. So if you're doing something, do it out of the goodness of your heart. My wife's favorite quote, figure it out. There's a great saying by James Olstein, those who live under nest will never learn to fly. And like I said earlier, my daughters have their own homes. They have their own lives. They're not coming here looking for money. She raised them to be independent. We have an epidemic in this country, but we have 46-year-old people living with their mother and fathers because they made mistakes. I had told my children, and so did my wife, if you buy another house and you need to stay here for a month while your house is being finished or the closing, that's fine. Okay? God forbid you get sick, we're here. But if you mess up your mortgage payment or you make bad decisions in life, we're not your exit strategy. And so my daughters, through broken pumps in their water system to septics that overflow to all the different challenges that Storm and Emily and Justin and Rachel have had, even with Jackson, we don't have a mom to babysit. Emily makes trips from Ellington to Woodbury to keep the family together. What my daughters have done is what my wife taught them. You got to figure it out. You got to figure it out. Like I said earlier, she was tough, but life is tough. Here's one of these moments that was going on around this time, 9 years ago. Rachel said to her mother, "You're not going to die, Mom." And my wife said to her, "I'm working on it, Rachel." And then she said to me, because we show dairy cows, my daughter had a whole string of jerseys. That's a breed of cows. She showed cows for 14 years. And my wife was sitting on a couch one day after a chemotherapy. And she said, "You know, hon, we're going to have to do the fairs a little different. Here's a woman fighting stage 4 lung cancer. And who is she thinking about? Her daughter." People who say things like consuming would never, ever say that because they'd only be thinking about themselves. They wouldn't have a clue or the insight as to what Lori's beautiful heart said when she said, "We're going to have to do the fairs different this year because of the cancer." She didn't say, "We're not doing fairs this year because I'm sick. We're going to have to do them different." When it says in Scripture, when one lays down his life for another, that's exactly what Jesus is talking about. Lori didn't jump in front of a train, but she said, "We're going to do the fairs different so that her daughter can still compete." That's what laying down one's life for another. That's not consumption, boys and girls. That's love. Be careful of dangerously stupid people. Pearl Buck says this: "A good marriage is one that allows for change and growth in the individual." My wife and I used to go to church all the time. And then one day she said to me, "I don't want to go anymore." I said, "Why not?" She goes, "I don't get anything out of it." My wife had more faith in her pinky than I have in my whole body. I said, "Well, if you don't want to go, that's fine." She said, "But when you come home from Mass, I want to hear all about it." We had a friend back in those days. Her name was Jennifer Lowe. And she said to me, "You know, Tommy, after Lori passed, she must have been very strong in her love for you and your love for her, and the respect allows people to change and be individuals," what Pearl Buckland said, because she wasn't afraid to say, "I'm not going to church." She wasn't afraid. She was confident in herself, confident in your marriage, confident in growing and being an individual, that she chose not to go to church, and it didn't break up the marriage. Why? Because we loved each other. In Rachel's card, when Rachel turned 12, my wife wrote, "12 already. I can't believe it. You've grown up so fast. What a beautiful young woman you have become." It went on from there. My younger daughter, Rachel, has that phrase tattooed in her arm. That's how much her mother meant to her, that she wanted to keep those words where she could look at it every day. I hope all of you that have children, that you have the relationship that my two daughters had with her. But she had that relationship because she loved them, she was firm, she was honest, she was trustworthy. There's a lot of women in this world that have more than Lori, but they can't even come close. Rachel has that tattooed in her arm. What a beautiful young woman you've become. I can't believe you're 12 already. Here's another last moment before we get to the takeaway. She used to tell me, "Hun, when the kids come home," well, Emily wasn't living here then, but she'd come here. She said, "Have me sit up. I don't want the kids to see me laying down and see me weak." Boom. When one lays down his life for another. She didn't think of herself, boys and girls. She thought of them. She said one time when her head was shaved and all of that awful thing, let me tell you something, boys and girls, cancer sucks. You want to know the truth? There are things in life that you get through, but there's some things in life that you'll never get over. And she didn't want them to see her laying down as a form of weakness. What did I say earlier? She was a force. She was a powerhouse. So she sat up as sick as she was, so they could see their mother sitting and not laying down. The takeaway is the last story. Because my daughter showed dairy cattle, we never got to go see Lee's because the dairy show thing went from March all the way to October. So my late wife and I used to go out and look at sticks because all the leaves were gone. So we went up Route 8 here. You go all the way up towards Massachusetts, a beautiful lake there. We pull in, we're having lunch. And all the boats, the rowboats are turned upside down, and the two of us are sitting there, got the radio on, nice and soft, and we're having our sandwiches with potato chips and everything. And I looked over at her and I said, hon, everything I do, going on retreat at Holy Family Retreat Center, going to Mass, doing things with the kids, I love all of it. I love all of it. I said, but the only thing that gives me real peace is when I'm sitting here with you. Only real peace was sitting with her. That peace left us 9 years ago today. But that peace lives in Emily. It lives in Rachel. It lives in Jackson, her first grandson, and our second grandson on the way is going to be Wesson. You see, boys and girls, you never really die. You live in those that you love, your children, your grandchildren, beyond. And so sometimes we think we find peace. We don't. But I was fortunate enough that for 31 years, the only time I found real peace, tranquility, is when I was with her. I want to thank everyone listening today. Sorry that we didn't have the classroom set up today. I wanted to do it this way. I will not be here for the next couple of weeks, taking a little summer hiatus, and then I'll be back in 2 weeks. If you're married and if your wife is alive, go home and hug her. If your husband is alive, hug her. If you got kids, hug them. Take today's message. Pay a tribute to people when they're alive, which I used to do. Don't wait till they're dead. And so there's a beautiful song I want you all to listen to. Jock is going to play that in 30 seconds. I want to thank you, Jock Williams, for allowing me to do this type of show today. Thank all of you for listening. And be yourself, boys and girls, like Lori was, because everyone else is taken. Thank you. See you in 2 weeks. Jock, play the song.